Today I'm in London's oldest shopping venue, the Burlington Arcade. It's over 200 years old and was in fact a precursor to today's shopping mall. It's famous for its ornate Regency architecture, its high-end luxury goods, and of course, its beetles.
Hello, my name's Mark Lord and I'm the head beadle here at the Burlington Arcade.
First of all, lovely to meet you, Mark Lord, head beadle at the Burlington Arcade.
Thank you.
The question everyone wants the answer to is, what is a beadle?
Okay, a beadle is, well, before you had a recognised police force anywhere in the country, certain institutions used to employ a beadle to keep order or to keep records. So if you were the church beadle, you would keep marriages, deaths and births. If you were the workhouse beadle, just like in Oliver Twist, you would keep order within the workhouse. So when the arcade was built in 1819, the beadles were employed from Lord Cavendish's regiment to keep order within the arcade.
Okay.
So because there was no police force, we were the ones that literally would have been at either end of the arcade and said yes or no to everybody that came into the arcade. Now, in those days, believe it or believe it not, unaccompanied ladies were not allowed into the arcade.
Really?
True. Groups of small children were not allowed into the arcade. You weren't actually allowed to show merriment in the arcade. Okay, I can see the quizzical look on your face. That's because nobody drank water. You and I would never have drunk water in London. We would have drunk gin or beer, which had been boiled to make the alcohol. Okay? So, we would have probably been quite tipsy most of the time.
I quite like the sound of being here.
Yeah, maybe we should go back in time. So what would happen is obviously you get a lot of antisocial behaviour. So the beadles literally would have sat at either end of the arcade and just sort of made sure that this 200, just under 200 yards, was like a little island of tranquility, really.
Yeah.
So you could come up to Mayfair, you could shop in the arcade, as long as you obeyed the rules and as long as you respected all of the other visitors to the arcade, then everything was fine. But the beadles would have, if you misbehaved.
If you misbehaved. Now, talking of the misbehaviour, there are certain bylaws that are attributed to the Burlington Arcade that are fairly unique in their stature, as it were. Could you tell me about those?
Okay. Well, they all relate back to 1819 when we opened. Okay. One of them was the unaccompanied ladies. Nowadays we allow unaccompanied ladies in. The main one in those days really was no whistling.
No whistling?
No whistling. Again, think of, we've just finished the Napoleonic Wars. Wars produce orphans, widows and wounded soldiers. The orphans would pick a pocket or two. So, how the pickpockets would communicate with each other, they would whistle. So you're not supposed to whistle in the arcade. We have the famous two people that are allowed to whistle in the arcade. One is Sir Paul McCartney.
Sir Paul
McCartney. He is allowed to whistle because the Apple Studios are in Savile Row, and he used to walk through here on his way to the Apple Studios, number 3 Savile Row. And one day, one of my predecessors, okay son, stop it, no whistling. When he saw who it was, he went, all right, you can have a licence. The second licence is for a young boy called Jaden, who so I actually gave him the licence. It's one of the nicest things. I think it's one of the things I'll always remember in my time here.
Yeah.
Jaden's uncle came to see me. Jaden had seen me on a YouTube video, and Jaden loved history. So he asked if I would give Jaden a tour and talk about the history of the arcade and other bits and pieces like that. I did, and at the end of the tour, I said to Jaden, if he did really, really well at school, I would give him a licence to whistle in the arcade. 4 or 5 years later, his uncle came to see me, said, you probably don't recognise me, but I recognised his voice. Of all the strange things, I recognised his voice. And I was able to give Jaden a licence to whistle within the arcade. What we normally do, particularly at this Christmas time of year, you'll always have three things will always happen at Christmas.
Yeah.
You'll get a public school boy who will look at you because he wants to be told off. Something to do with our public school system.
So they're trying to break the rules.
Trying to break the rules.
Yeah.
Then the next one, I'm going to have to physically touch you here. Sorry.
Go on.
2 builders, tell him it's true, tell him he doesn't believe me. They may have partaken.
Yeah.
And you'll tell them the story about the no whistling, and they will be over the moon.
Yeah.
Right? The other one is small children with their parents or their grandparents. They'll tug your sleeve. Excuse me, is it true you're not allowed to whistle in the arcade? And then you always say the same thing, and all the boys will say exactly the same thing to them. Have you been good at school this year? And you will see the panic go across
their eyes.
Literally across. And then if they say yes, which they always do,
yeah.
You say, right, okay, today Mark said you've got a special whistle licence, only for today, because you've got to be good next year as well.
And the only way you can get dispensation to whistle is through you.
Through me.
The head beadle.
The head beadle, yeah.
The head beadle.
The head beadle,
how
yeah.
long have you been the head beadle here, and how did you get to this position?
I've been here 20 years and 6 months, roughly. I used to work for the Prudential, the big insurance company.
Yeah.
Who used to own this at that time. And I looked after a load of different buildings for them. And then they offered me this job here, and I turned it down 3 times, I think it was, 2 or 3 times. And the reason why I turned it down is, and this is going to be hard to believe when you see what I'm wearing today, my dad told me the uniform was chocolate brown with gold, and I thought I'd look a bit like a chocolate, whatever.
But it wasn't that, was it?
No, it wasn't this. It was grey actually at the time.
Okay.
This uniform's a whole different story. And then what happened was they kept offering it to me, telling me I wouldn't have to wear a uniform, this, that, and the other. And I used to come through here and walk through, and I liked the atmosphere, I liked the feeling. And then I came here. The uniforms take approximately 3 months, 12 weeks to manufacture, because they're all bespoke made for us.
Right, yeah.
In that time, I realised that you couldn't really do the job without wearing a uniform, because you become a focal. It's like the yellow light on a cab.
Yeah.
You're the focal point.
Yeah.
So then they told me, "Oh, you can just wear it at events, certain occasions, but you do have to wear it every day." And I remember the first day that I came into the arcade wearing it. The manager of Church's Shoes was called Tony Fox. I came down into the arcade, and without breaking stride, and I saw him coming towards me, he went, "Suits you, looks good," and walked on, and I felt 10 feet tall. And from that moment on, it literally, when you put the uniform on, it becomes a role that you're playing.
Hand in glove, perfect fit.
Yeah, you are representing London, you are representing the arcade. And we live in the greatest city in the world. And you get to meet really interesting people from all over the world, every walk of life you can imagine. And you get, sometimes, if you're really lucky, you get to put a smile on someone's face. And that's...
Mark, I think you probably do that every day. So how many Beadles are there in the arcade?
There are 7 of us altogether.
7, yeah. And do you work shifts?
Yeah, they all work shift patterns. I normally nowadays, because of my age, I only work Monday to Fridays.
Yeah.
But there's 4 of us here every day of the week. We're manned overnight. And touch wood, we're one of the safest shopping environments in London. So that's why, as we've walked up here today, you've seen some of the beautiful shops.
Yeah. They are incredible to look at.
They're amazing.
They are incredible.
And every day that I come to work, every day that I come in, there's always something for me to look at. I mean, I've touched In the past, I've touched dinner plates that King George III used. I've held a ring that Mary Antoinette had specially made for her. She had tiny, tiny little fingers.
And all of it came
Here.
from the arcade?
Yeah, all came
of
from
it
here.
here. What particular attributes makes a good beetle?
A sense of humour. Well, no, it does, because if you can if you can joke with somebody,
Yeah.
yeah, they're normally going to behave better.
Yeah.
And understanding other cultures, I think helps, because obviously the 4 million visitors a year that visit the arcade, they'll come from everywhere. So respecting other people, wanting to learn about the history of the arcade, about the history. For instance, if we see something particularly interesting in one of the units, one of the boutiques,
Yes.
we will find out about it. So that if I'm doing a tour with a member of the public or a journalist, I can incorporate that into the tour. Because we have some of the finest jewellery that you'll ever see. We have watches that nowhere else in London has. You know, we have beautiful, beautiful items in here.
Yes.
And people don't have to come here just to buy an expensive item. You can come here to have a coffee or just to walk through and enjoy the beautiful surroundings in a safe...
Just to experience the ambience.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're walking through, how old is the arcade?
203, nearly 204 years old. On the 20th of March 2023, we will be 204.
And who was it built by?
It was built by George Weir, an architect, but he built it on behalf of Lord Cavendish, who lived in Burlington House, which is now the Royal Academy of Arts. And this, what we've just walked up, is all actually part of a stable. It was his stables in his garden. What we've just walked up, apart from the two ends, was exactly how it was then. Yeah, the two ends have been redeveloped. The Burlington Gardens end because of bomb damage in the Second World War, and the Piccadilly entrance, they wanted to widen it because before it was columns. So they wanted to widen it so that it was more inviting for people to walk in. We haven't walked up any steps, have we? We've just walked up casually. This end where we're standing is 10 feet higher than the bottom end.
Is that right?
It is, yeah. You should see my calf muscles. So the original plan was for some steps, but Lady Cavendish didn't want to have to walk up any steps. That's why we have an incline.
We have the incline all the way up.
All the way up. There was also a charitable element to the arcades. The Cavendish family had a regiment. In those days, the British Army was quite small. When we went to war, the aristocracy would always raise their own regiments. As I've already explained, wars bring back wounded soldiers, widows.
Yeah.
So in those days, there wasn't a social network to help these people. So the original Beadles came from the regiment, and about 15%, we think, of the original tenants were widows of soldiers that had fought for the family regiment.
Interesting.
Because they would have lived here as well, above the shops. In some of the basements of some of the units, we still have the cooking ranges.
Oh, is that right? Really? Yeah. So some of these sort of units above were abodes.
Yeah.
Where people used to live up here.
Yeah.
Families used to live.
Families used to live.
Because when you do look up, they do look as if, you know, they look like dwellings.
They were. That's exactly what they were.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they were. So you would live upstairs, trade from here, and have all of your cooking and your storage downstairs. In fact, where you're standing, there's a tunnel that runs the entire length of the arcade. And one of our rules, which I haven't mentioned until now, was if you made a purchase, you weren't actually allowed to carry it from the shop to the end of the arcade, because it would have been ungentlemanlike or unladylike. So it would have been brought to you through the corridor.
This is the head Beadle's uniform.
No, this is the Beadle's uniform.
Ah, okay.
The only difference that my uniform has that the rest of the chaps don't is that little button.
Oh, this here?
Yeah, there's a little button on the top there.
Yeah.
The other guys don't have that. They have everything.
The silver button?
Yes.
This one here.
Our uniforms are manufactured for us by Henry Paul, who look after the now King's livery. We went to see Keith at Henry Paul in Savile Row with some ideas. And as you go into Henry Paul, there's some beautiful leather settees and some chairs and a lovely oak mahogany table with lovely materials on it, and scarves and ties. And I could see Keith's eyes rolling in the back of his head. Very politely, very discreetly, but I could see him doing it. So I said to him, what would you do? What would you design? He picked up a pad and a pencil, and then he just started to draw. And he came up with what you see now, which is a combination of the dress uniform of the regiment. That's why our winter uniform is a cape, because the cape would protect the saddle, because it was a cavalry regiment.
Yeah, I see the other Beadles wearing a cape at the moment.
So this is a cross between the dress uniform and a footman's uniform. The lace we have imported from France. The buttons we have specially cast for us. And the hats we have made by Lock & Co, who also have a royal warrant. Our shoes are from Crockett and Jones, who also have a royal warrant. And it's funny, the uniforms, people love the uniforms. Obviously because you're very identifiable. People will want their photograph taken, or they will ask the question you've just asked. And it was wonderful because the whole process of it, from the design, the manufacture, to wearing it, and it was the first time that I personally had ever worn anything that was bespoke made for me.
Yeah.
And you probably haven't gathered, but I'm a bit of an unusual shape. So it literally, you mentioned earlier on, hand in glove.
Yeah.
It literally feels like you're putting on a glove.
And the reaction of the general public?
They love it, normally. Yeah, they love it.
Tell me how they react to you and what questions you get asked. Okay.
Do you work here is always the funniest one, which I'm always tempted to say no, nothing to do with the arcade. But people will just want their picture taken. They'll ask what the uniform signifies. But the main thing is, it connects us to the arcade. Yeah. It connects us to the history of the arcade. When you're working here, you are representing not just yourself, you are representing all the Beadles that came before you. You're representing all the Beadles that will come after you. But the most important thing is you're representing the arcade. The arcade. And we're very, very lucky in the arcade. I mean, I could pick out items in virtually every shop that you would think to yourself, for instance, Swain. Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones? Yeah. Oh, was his hat? Yeah. Did his hat come from this shop?
Yeah. Yeah, this company, yeah.
Oh, they made the Indiana Jones hat for those movies?
The umbrella, they also made the umbrellas for the huntsman. So in the arcade, we have Globetrotter, who produced Mr. Bond's luggage. Yeah. Swain, who produced Mr. Bond's briefcase. Crockett's, who produced his shoes. Yeah. Amiga, that produced his watches. Bollinger, which is his favourite tipple. And N. Pill, which is his favourite cashmere.
Burlington Arcade collaborates with movie productions. This year's movie is Babylon, starring Margot Robbie and Brad Pitt. The actual costumes used in the movie are here in this shop front. The arcade puts on some incredible theming at different times of the year. Now, there's some movie theming on at the moment. Yes. So do you marry up with these new films that are opening?
Sometimes. I mean, we did it with Bond last year, and this year we've done it with Babylon, which is a Paramount movie coming out, I believe, the 20th of January. I believe it's the 20th of January.
Are you in that movie, Mark?
Now, Mr. Pitt didn't want a competition, so
Makes sense.
yeah, I know.
Makes sense.
Well,
Yeah.
So the whole movie is set around that period in time where it changed from silent to talking.
okay.
Yeah, and the excess of Hollywood at that time. Now, it was also a wonderful, stylish time. You know, you've got that. If you look at the clothes that the people wore, or the cars that were driven, they're fantastic. They're absolutely amazing. So this year we've twinned with Babylon, and our Christmas installation is the inspiration actually came from the movie, and particularly the nightclub scene in the movie at the beginning. Yeah, so it's...
Well, it's a good fit. I mean,
it's a great fit.
The movie's got great style.
Yeah.
Burlington Arcade has got great style.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
Mark, you yourself have got great style. So it's a win-win, isn't it?
Well, we like to think so. But what's really nice about it is last year with the Bond, very British, very sort of like, you know,
Yeah.
that niche sort of British look and feel. Babylon has really, Babylon, Hollywood, glitz, glamour. That's what it's about. And, you know, we've had loads of Americans that have come to London to do their Christmas shopping.
Yeah.
Europeans that come to the arcade every year. You see the same faces every year. And they're really excited by this movie. You know, you've probably noticed as we've walked up, we've got like a rather large golden elephant in the middle of the arcade, which is a perfect example of, this is a 204-year-old Regency building, okay? But whatever you seem to put in here works.
I heard that the arcade houses a very famous jewellers called Hancocks.
It does, actually. We're just coming up to it here on the left-hand side. Now, Hancocks has exquisite jewellery. I mean, there are items in there that they were owned by famous figures from history, incredibly famous figures from history. And they also produced the Victoria Cross, which, as you probably know, is the highest medal of honour you can be awarded. Now, the Victoria Cross is made of bronze. Okay, it's from a cannon that was captured from the Russians at the Battle of Sebastopol, but it's actually a Chinese cannon. There's only about a football-sized amount left, and it's bronze, it's a base metal, but we cannot keep it here in the arcade. It has to be kept at the Royal Armoury in Donington because of its value to the nation. And I've met people from all over the world who have come to Hancocks to have their picture taken just in front of the store. One was the head of the German Armed Forces. Some were from a town in Canada where three gentlemen, all from the same local neighbourhood, all won the Victoria Cross. And some are from, it's now a town in Australia, but it was literally a sheep station. These guys, just in like in the film Gallipoli, these guys left the sheep station, got to the coast, enlisted in the Australian Army, probably went to Gallipoli, I would have thought, and they all won the Victoria Cross. These three friends all won. So people from that town will travel literally halfway around the world to come to visit Hancocks.
The actual shop in London where the Victoria Cross is made and put together.
Yeah, and I've held a Victoria Cross, which was awarded to a gentleman who won it in Iraq. And I can tell you now, it's incredibly powerful because it is so simple, but of what it stands for. Yeah, that would also be one of my biggest memories from the arcade.
The arcade's got this ability to adopt a style, to
Yeah.
adopt a fashion and make it its own.
Yes, 100%.
It just does it with ease.
As if it, going back to the expression, put your hand in the glove. Yeah, it's a magical place, you know. And I can honestly say, I mean, you must have been the same when, you know, when you were out driving the cab.
Yeah.
You never know the next person that's going to get in the back. Yeah, I never know the next person I'm going to talk to.
What's your most memorable incident or event that's ever happened here? Does anything spring to mind?
I was at the top gate one night, and we'd shut. The arcade was closed. I was just there letting tenants out. That's all I was doing. And what happened was, I even remember the colour of the car. It was like a, British Racing Green?
Yes.
Mondeo. Had a big dent in the back, on the, on the passenger side at the back. Mum and Dad in the front, and 3 angelic-looking little kids in the back. And they were like, "Oh, are you closed? We've come to look at the Christmas lights." And I'm going to be a bit romantic here, and a bit sort of like, when you look at lights on a cold winter evening, and they've got that magical sparkle. So I'm like, "You kids been good?" I said it was almost the same routine as with the whistling. They said, yeah, we've been good. So I said, "Okay, like, you're going with your mum." I said, "And you can break 2 rules. You can whistle and you can run up and down." Right, and they did it. They were over the moon. They came back for about 4 or 5 years afterwards.
So
Hello, mate. Do you remember me?
You made their Christmas.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
fact, you made all of their Christmases.
And it didn't cost a penny.
Of course, but
It didn't cost a penny.
It's something that they'll never forget.
No.
And obviously, you've never
No,
forgotten.
I mean, that's got to be 17, 18 years ago. They're probably young adults now, maybe with their own families. But yeah, so it's stuff, bits and pieces like that. I mean, if I started, the list would go on and on. It really would.
Finally, what are your hopes and aspirations for the next 100 years of the Burlington Arcade? And where do you see the Beadles?
Hopefully I'll have retired. What I see the Beadles adapting and changing. More interaction with the public, probably. We have a lot now, but I think people want experiences now. After lockdown, where you could go click, 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 and someone rings your bell and it's sitting outside, I think people want to interact now more. They want to, if they buy something, they want to touch it, they want to feel it, they want to, they want to experience it. So I think that our role could develop along those lines. I see the arcade. It's a very simple question to answer. I see the arcade representing London, same as it has for the last 200 years.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it'll be here for another 200 years.
Yeah, without a doubt. Look, if we didn't organically change and grow, it would have been redeveloped by now. Yeah. So what the arcade does organically is what will happen in the next 100 years, 200 years. So I've got no fears whatsoever about the arcade.
Thanks for watching Secrets of London with me, Mark Monroe. Leave any comments down below. Hit that thumbs up button. And if you really enjoyed the episode, why not subscribe? And thanks so much to Burlington Arcade's amazing Beadles. Until next time, stay tuned.